Alex Parker was just 17 when he turned a quiet suburban home into the scene of a nightmare, murdering his own parents, Daniel and Karen, not out of anger or desperation, but for something far more twisted: online clout. What looked like the life of an ordinary teenager quickly unraveled into a chilling obsession with internet fame, where every click, like, and view mattered more than human life. This is the disturbing story of how a boy next door became a cold-blooded killer, and how his hunger for recognition left a community shattered forever. 17-year-old Alex Parker seemed like any other teenager in the quiet suburb of Lakewood. His life, on the surface, was simple and uneventful. He went to school, did his homework, and lived in a modest home with his parents, Daniel and Karen Parker. They worked hard to give him a comfortable life, and from the outside, the family looked ordinary, almost perfect. But behind Alex's blank expression and quiet demeanor, something unsettling was brewing. He wasn't interested in school achievements, friendships, or hobbies like his peers. Instead, his obsession revolved around one thing: fame on the internet. Social media consumed his thoughts, and every day he compared himself to influencers who lived flashy lives, adored by millions of followers. The more he scrolled, the more he felt invisible in his own world. Alex began to crave attention in the most dangerous way. He didn't want to be known for kindness or skill. He wanted to shock people, to make them remember his name forever. What started as harmless daydreaming soon twisted into darker fantasies. He watched videos and read stories of killers who became infamous after their crimes, and instead of feeling disgusted, he felt inspired. The thrill of being talked about, even for something horrific, appealed to him more than the idea of working hard for success. It didn't matter what people thought of him, as long as they were talking. His parents had no idea that their son was slipping into a dangerous spiral. They continued with their daily lives, encouraging him to think about college and a future career. But late at night, while they slept, Alex sat in his room rehearsing. He practiced recording himself, testing camera angles, adjusting lighting, and imagining how a video of his actions would look online. He wanted every detail to be perfect, as if his crime were a performance. His mind, once filled with ordinary teenage worries, became consumed by how to stage his way into digital fame. By the end of summer, Alex had already made a decision that would change everything. He no longer looked at his parents as the people who raised and cared for him, but as the perfect characters in his twisted plan. To him, they were obstacles, and at the same time, tools to make his story unforgettable. The thought of betrayal didn't disturb him anymore. In his eyes, it was the only path forward. His countdown to infamy had already begun, and no one around him suspected the horror that was about to unfold inside the Parker home. The plan that Alex Parker formed was not something impulsive or rushed. It grew slowly, taking shape over weeks as his obsession with internet clout deepened. He studied his parents' habits with a precision that felt almost clinical. He knew when they went to bed, what time they woke up, how deeply they slept, and which nights they stayed up late watching television. He observed quietly, storing every detail away as if he were preparing for a test. In reality, he was preparing for murder. His phone became a tool for research, filled with disturbing searches on methods of killing and how to conceal evidence. Each time he typed something into the search bar, his heart raced, but not from fear, rather from excitement. He believed he was creating something that would make him unforgettable. When October arrived, Alex's fantasies became unbearable. He had rehearsed in his mind so many times that the actual act felt less like a question of if and more a question of when. That night, when the sky outside was dark and the air carried a sharp chill, Alex made his move. The house was quiet, his parents sound asleep in their bedroom. He took a knife from the kitchen, gripping it tightly as he walked down the hallway. His mind was not clouded with panic. Instead, it was strangely calm, as though he were following a script he had memorized. Inside the room, the attack was swift and merciless. Daniel and Karen Parker never had a chance to fight back or cry for help. The silence of the suburban home was replaced with something irreversible, something that marked the end of their lives and the end of any normalcy for Alex. But unlike most killers who might feel horror or regret in the aftermath, Alex felt an almost mechanical detachment. His first instinct was not to hide the evidence or even leave the house. Instead, he reached for his phone. He began filming the aftermath with the precision of someone staging a scene for an audience. He adjusted the lighting, changed camera positions, and made sure the frames captured what he thought would shock viewers the most. In his mind, this was his masterpiece, the event that would catapult him from an unnoticed teenager to a viral sensation. As he uploaded cryptic images and captions online, he imagined the flood of attention, the endless comments, and the digital fame he had longed for. But what he failed to realize was that the very evidence he was creating would soon be the key to unraveling his entire plan. The morning after the murders, the Parker household appeared undisturbed from the outside. The curtains were drawn, the lawn was neatly trimmed, and the quiet street carried on as if nothing unusual had happened. But inside, a chilling silence lingered, broken only by the faint hum of electronics left running from Alex's recording. While he scrolled through his phone, refreshing social media to check for reactions, the outside world began to take notice in ways he had not anticipated. At school, whispers started when classmates stumbled upon Alex's late-night posts. The content was cryptic but unsettling: blurred images, strange captions, and hints of something dark. Some students dismissed it as a prank or desperate attempt to seem edgy, but others felt a deep unease. Screenshots spread quickly, shared in group chats until nearly everyone had seen them. Teachers overheard conversations and, sensing something was wrong, alerted the school counselor. Concern was beginning to build before anyone even knew the full truth. Meanwhile, neighbors noticed odd details about the Parker home. Karen hadn't left for work that morning, something unusual for her dependable routine. Daniel missed an early meeting, and his business partner's calls went unanswered. The family's car sat in the driveway untouched. By afternoon, the quiet concern of neighbors turned into action. One finally picked up the phone and requested a welfare check. When police arrived, they knocked on the front door but received no response. From the windows, the house looked still, yet something felt off. Officers forced their way in, and what they discovered was far worse than anyone expected. In the bedroom, Daniel and Karen Parker's bodies were found, evidence of a violent and deliberate attack. The once ordinary suburban home was now a crime scene, filled with a heavy silence that clung to every corner. But what unsettled investigators most was the discovery of equipment scattered throughout the house. A tripod stood in the hallway. A phone had been set to record. The placement of objects suggested intention, as if the crime had been staged for an audience. This was not an act of rage or a sudden outburst. It was carefully planned, almost performed. As word spread through Lakewood, shock and fear gripped the community. The image of the polite teenager next door collided with the horrifying reality of what he had done. For detectives, the next step became clear: find Alex Parker before he had the chance to slip further into the darkness he had created. Detectives wasted no time focusing on Alex Parker as their prime suspect. The crime scene itself pointed directly to him. The murder weapon, a kitchen knife, carried his fingerprints clearly, and the digital trail he left behind was impossible to ignore. His phone contained searches about how to kill quickly, how to stage scenes for impact, and even examples of criminals who gained notoriety after their crimes. Every post he had uploaded the night of the murders was preserved, shared, and screenshotted across the internet. What Alex thought would make him famous was now a mountain of evidence against him. Tracking him down was surprisingly easy. Alex hadn't fled far. He was staying at a friend's house, behaving as though nothing extraordinary had happened. When officers arrived, he didn't resist. He was calm, eerily composed, and almost expectant. To the shock of investigators, he didn't appear nervous or regretful. Instead, he carried himself with an unsettling pride, as though being caught was part of the plan, another way to ensure his story would spread further. Back at the station, interrogators quickly realized they were dealing with a teenager consumed by delusions of grandeur. He answered questions in a detached way, explaining his actions not as crimes but as choices for recognition. He spoke about the internet as if it were an audience waiting to be entertained. And his parents, he admitted, were merely the characters he had chosen for his performance. The lack of remorse was chilling. Meanwhile, forensic teams built an airtight case. The knife bore not only Alex's prints but also DNA evidence tying him directly to the attack. His laptop revealed months of disturbing searches and drafts of captions he planned to post. Even the equipment in the house: tripods, lighting setups, recording angles demonstrated how much thought had gone into staging the crime. Each detail stripped away any doubt that this had been intentional and premeditated. News outlets quickly picked up the story, and soon the entire country knew the name Alex Parker. But instead of admiration, his online fame became infamy. People expressed outrage, disbelief, and disgust. His posts, once intended to shock viewers into making him viral, were now dissected by reporters and detectives as disturbing evidence. In the end, Alex achieved the attention he wanted, but in the most damning way possible. He had destroyed his family and any chance at a normal future, leaving behind a legacy that horrified everyone who heard his name. The trial of Alex Parker quickly became one of the most talked about cases in the nation. Courtrooms were filled with journalists, curious locals, and grieving relatives who wanted answers to how a seemingly normal teenager could commit such a brutal act. The prosecution painted a clear picture. Alex was not a confused child who acted out in the heat of the moment. He was a calculating young man who meticulously planned his parents' murders for one reason only: online attention. Jurors were shown his disturbing posts, his searches for notoriety, and the way he staged the crime scene as though it were a film set. Each piece of evidence pushed the narrative further that Alex cared more about being seen than about the lives he had destroyed. The defense tried to argue that Alex was a victim of the toxic pressures of social media, claiming his fragile mind had been warped by endless comparisons and the desire to be noticed. They suggested he was overwhelmed and not fully in control of his actions. But psychologists who examined him painted a different, chilling portrait. They described him as narcissistic, detached from empathy, and dangerously obsessed with recognition. His lack of remorse was evident in every report, and the recordings he left behind spoke louder than any testimony. As the trial unfolded, the community of Lakewood struggled with disbelief. Neighbors who once waved at the Parkers on their morning walks sat in silence, unable to understand how the polite boy they had known could harbor such darkness. Teachers replayed memories of Alex sitting quietly in class, wondering how none of them saw the warning signs. For the classmates who had stumbled upon his cryptic posts, the guilt of not speaking up sooner lingered heavily. The jury's decision came quickly. Alex Parker was found guilty on all charges: 2 counts of first-degree murder, along with evidence tampering and premeditation. The judge handed down the harshest sentence possible for his age: life in prison without the possibility of parole. At just 17, Alex's future ended in a prison cell, his name permanently tied to infamy. Online, the story of Alex Parker spread far and wide, not as a tale of someone who achieved fame, but as a grim warning of the dangers of clout-chasing culture. Instead of millions of fans, he had millions of horrified onlookers. The boy who wanted to be remembered became exactly that, but remembered only as a chilling reminder of what obsession with internet recognition can destroy.